You're very, very, very peaceful. So I'm wondering, can you just tell me a little bit like about a day for you? And do you ever like get angry when you don't get a parking space or something?
Oh, well. It's always interesting to look at your triggers, right? And to see how they show up in your life. And I never love it when I get stuck behind someone who's doing 30 miles an hour on a 50 road. My first instinct is, oh, I need to get to the office. And then my second instinct is, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, you're right. I should slow down and enjoy the hills. So I'm very human. And like everybody, I have my stressful, stress days and days where I think I've got better at catching it now. And part of my work in the last, few years has been balancing holding big energy and then really working to bring myself back to the small and the domestic and the grounded. And that's still something I'm, working on, but that's where my evolutionary path lies.
That's a relief.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And it's easy to read. It's not like,
Great.
I'm going to wait till I'm more involved.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That means the world. So thank you.
Lee, I was curious. I know that disease came in while you're riding subway.
Yeah, so I first really got introduced to intuition and metaphysics in a more overt way when I was 16. I remember going to a tarot reader, and I remember taking my mom to that tarot reader. She was nervous and scared about it, but I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and I didn't know why at the time. But there was something that would happen in the tarot reading room, and there would be an energy shift that I would feel. And now that is the same energy shift I feel when I channel disease, but cranked up to about a 10. So what I understand now is I felt very at home in spiritual energy. And I think like many sensitive or empathic people, and any of us who've grown up in the cultural conditioning that we've grown up in our generations, you can feel very ill at ease in the traditional human world, or in the way that we as a society are told to show up and behave. So from the age of 16, 17, I got very into metaphysical books, but I was never that into, I certainly wasn't into channeling. If anything, that for me was a little too fringe. I was more interested in self-growth and personal development, and I would take myself off to these workshops. But it was 23 when I first heard disease, and honestly, the weirdest thing about it was, if there was one thing I thought I knew, it was that no way were you going to become a channeler on the subway. It's like, no way. Like, I should surely be a really pure person. And they appeared to me when I was in the middle of negative self-thoughts, which was, kind of normal for me in my early 20s, blaming myself for everything, attacking myself for things, occasionally blaming someone outside me. But it wasn't high consciousness thoughts, but that was how I knew they were different. I was like, what is this voice that comes in and tells me that these thoughts are wrong and explains why? And as they explain why, I see the logic in their answer, even though I couldn't see it. But more importantly, my body relaxes and I start to open up. And that's the effect I noticed that they have on me. So after, a few days of going, is this multiple personality disorder? Is this what it's like? I don't know. But I have to say, I remember thinking, well, if it is, I don't want it to go away. Like this is way more useful and way less problematic than I hear multiple personality disorder can be for some people, or perhaps the way it's portrayed by society. So it was very clear very quickly, because I asked them questions and they were like, we're your guides. You haven't been able to hear us since you were 6. So that was the moment. And it was a series of months and months and months of me coming home, excited to get home from work, to sit down and write more questions and get answers that started to changed the way I was seeing the world, changed the way I was seeing my life. Didn't give me an immediate enlightened personality or anything like that, but it started to shift me in the way that I could see things, in the way that I could perceive things. And then I confided to a few spiritual friends, and then I would give them readings, and that was kind of how it began.
When you talk about your family, sometimes when you meet somebody like you forget that you were raised in a family. Like it seems like you just, like you came from a light beam.
Right. This is the same issue I had with some people in my life. All of a sudden, it was like they couldn't allow me to still be the me that they knew and that could laugh with them and that loved movies and music and all of those grounded things. And then I'm doing this other thing over here. Like they couldn't allow me to be all of those things, but this weird thing superseded everything else, and they needed to reject me because of this one thing. So I think that is an issue that we have in society. You know, if there's one thing we don't like about somebody, we want to discount them completely. But I think more to the point, what I've come to notice, having done this work now publicly for 18 years, I didn't get this until I've seen it time and time again. We have been so conditioned, certainly in the West, to be afraid of and separate from spirituality. And the risk of this, and this is a thing we've seen time and time again, the problem is there is a kind of heartbreak that we as human beings go through around our spiritual teachers or our gurus or the people that we pedestal. And the reason we pedestal them is we think, well, they know everything and they know more than me. And that's because we've been told we know nothing about spirit and we can't connect to them. And actually, all those people are doing is reminding you we're all a bridge to spirit, and maybe their job at this moment is to shine that brightly because that's the thing they can offer society. Like, I'm really grateful to all the people who can do all the things I can't do that I benefit from. But I think that's where guru culture comes from. This separation and worship culture that's very dangerous, both for the worshipper and for the one who's worshipped. If they've got, you know, ego imbalances, that they inflate themselves and fall from a mighty height. We've seen that play out so many times. But what I came to realize is, when you look at the history of mysticism on Earth and the witch trials, and you know, we know that powerful, intuitive women were burned, not necessarily because they were witches, but it was convenient for the men running the society at the time to get rid of those powerful women. I mean, we've seen women get, you know, cut short for thousands and thousands of years. But we've also seen certain rules around how we're allowed to interact with spirit. And I'll tell you how you can meet God. And this interesting control hierarchy that we have as human beings, which thankfully, in some ways, we're going through a big healing shift around, and in other ways, we're seeing it rear its ugly head in response to the rise in consciousness. So I often look at it as that kind of energy template that we're dealing with. And so for me personally, it's you know, it's very sweet what you just said, but I'm like, oh, no. Trust me, hang out with me for a day. And yeah, the Z's have absolutely influenced me. But at the same time, I think that spirit's influencing all of us all of the time. And to me, it's dangerous for us to pedestal or guruize any one person, and it's dangerous to allow someone else to do it to you, because I've been up close and personal and I've seen that happen a lot of times. And I also was definitely someone who guruized in my early 20s because I thought spirit was so separate from me. And I don't blame anyone. I think we do it because culturally it's the way we've been trained, but it really harms everyone involved.
Yeah, because I get the sense, like even with you talking now, that actually we're all enlightened, but some of us are under a pillow or like something. And if you can just sort of allow yourself, like you could have shut that off. You could have been like, oh.
You know, I could have. And the one question that people have asked me is they go, were you scared? And my answer was very telling, and it told me something. I was never scared of them. I was terrified of what society was going to think.
Right.
They felt like home. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be very inconvenient, to the point that when I started doing readings, which was about 4 or 5 years afterwards,
Yeah.
I didn't tell my family for the first year. And I lost some friends too, which was tough. I lost some really close friends who I liked, who suddenly uh, either thought that I was the channel, which I never claimed to be, or they were triggered by it. So it was an interesting time, and it was a time that taught me a lot about, if you want to do this, one of the lessons you're going to receive is it's going to really make you trust who you are and what you believe. And I had been raised in a family where what the neighbors think is like of utmost importance. So that programming I was holding got really grappled with this process. But just to your point, you know, the Z's say that we all incarnate as these extraordinary souls, and the human conditioning that we are born into kind of clamps our potential. But even within that, they say it's extraordinary to be alive. Even within some of the gravity and the limitation, they say it's hard for you to believe that, especially on a day when you're suffering or when you're struggling with being on the planet. But they say it's true. And the more I've heard them say that now for 24 years, and the more they've explained why, the more I know it's true.
You know, the great thing about this that I really enjoyed was that you always stay lead. Like they talk about you like,
Oh, right.
you're just this guy and you could be my neighbor. You just are very light and fun.
Thank you for saying such lovely things, but I feel daily grateful to be in the position I'm in, because I think back to times in my life where I was more scared, more nervous, more, you know, the times in my teenage years when I was really suffering internally. And so, you know, for me, it's a complete privilege when you get to a place where the thing that you feel purposeful about is also something that seems to be helping and serving other. I mean, it's a complete win-win. So thank you. And from my 22-year-old self, his head is spinning with, you know, with even just this conversation. So thank you so much. Lots of love.
Thank you.